Millionaire's baby kept crying until a struggling single dad did the unthinkable. The fluorescent lights of the subway platform flickered above Elena Marlowe's head as she stepped onto the train, clutching her baby tighter to her chest. Her tailored blazer was wrinkled, her heels scuffed from the courthouse steps, and strands of blonde hair clung to her damp forehead. Max, her 10-month-old son, whimpered softly. His cheeks were flushed, his little body warm with a low-grade fever that had worsened since morning. The moment they stepped into the crowded train car, he began to cry. First softly, then louder. Elena rocked him gently, her heart pounding louder than the screech of the closing doors. Her hands trembled, her head throbbed. It had been a brutal day. That morning, she'd sat through 5 hours in court defending her company in a draining intellectual property case. Reporters had swarmed her on the courthouse steps. Her driver had texted at the last minute. Her car was seized, temporarily due to legal complications. Her assistant tried to call a ride, but the app failed. All options exhausted. She took the subway, alone with Max and no nanny. The young woman who usually accompanied them had received an emergency call at the previous stop. She'd rushed off in tears, leaving Elena to manage a sick, fussy baby by herself. Now Max let out a piercing cry. Elena bounced him, whispering to him through clenched teeth. He only screamed louder. A few passengers turned to look. Then, more. One woman muttered, "Some people should not be mothers." Another scoffed, "Bet she's one of those rich women who think money raises a child." Elena swallowed hard, their judgment hitting harder than any headline. Her eyes stung, her arms ached, and her nerves were fraying. Max's cries escalated. He kicked off the blanket, fists clenched, face red. She couldn't blame him. He was sick, overstimulated, just like her. A man in a suit stood up abruptly and walked to the far end of the car, muttering under his breath. Elena's breathing turned shallow. She rocked Max again, but her arms were stiff, numb, from holding him all day. Her chest tightened with embarrassment. She looked toward the door. Maybe she'd just get off at the next stop. Stand in the cold, call a cab, anything to escape these eyes, these whispers. Her lip trembled. "I'm sorry," she whispered into Max's ear, though she knew he couldn't understand. Her vision blurred. She blinked rapidly. Then, "Excuse me." The voice was warm, male, gentle. Startled, she turned. A man, early 30s, stood nearby. His button-up shirt was worn, the collar fraying, and his jeans had seen better days. His hair was tousled, face unshaven, but his eyes were kind. He cradled a small girl around 5 with dark curls and wide, curious eyes hugging a stuffed fox. "I don't mean to intrude," he said softly, "but would you like me to hold him for a minute if you need a break? I've been there." Elena blinked. "What? You look like you're doing everything you can," he said. "Sometimes that's already too much." Max was still crying, but something in the man's calm, steady tone, in the absence of pity or judgment, made her pause. She glanced at his daughter. The little girl smiled at Max and held up her fox. "He likes babies," she said. Elena hesitated, frozen by exhaustion. Every instinct screamed, no. She didn't know. This man couldn't trust him. But her arms were shaking, her legs numb, Max's cries relentless. She looked down and saw Max, still crying, reach a chubby hand toward the stranger. The man shifted his daughter to one side, freeing an arm. "Just for a minute," he said gently. "You can stay right here. I'm not going anywhere." Elena's defenses cracked. The judgment, the cameras, the loneliness. Everything felt too heavy. She exhaled, not at once. "Okay." With a final hiccuped sob, the baby stretched out his arms and leaned into the man's chest as if he belonged there. Elena's breath caught as she watched her son settle, his tiny head nestled against the stranger's shirt like it was something familiar. The man adjusted his grip naturally, supporting Max's head with ease. His hands were steady, confident, gentle. "Hi there, buddy," he said softly to the baby, his voice low and calming. "Rough day, huh?" A few seconds passed. Max let out a soft whimper, then stopped crying. "Best." Stopped. Alina blinked, stunned. The train rocked gently as it picked up speed. Passengers returned to their conversations, the tension in the car melting away. The judgmental glances had faded, but Alina still felt frozen in place. She looked at the man again, her voice barely above a whisper. "How did you do that?" He gave a modest shrug, as if this kind of thing happened every day. "I'm Daniel," he said, shifting his daughter slightly to his other side. "And this is Emily." The little girl gave a small wave. "Hi." Elena managed a weak smile. Elena and Max. Daniel nodded. "Nice to meet you, Elena." And Max. Emily reached into her tiny backpack and pulled out a homemade toy. A small rattle crafted from a plastic bottle filled with beads and wrapped in colorful tape. She leaned over, holding it in front of Max's face. "Look what I made," she said proudly. Max blinked at the toy. The beads shimmered and clicked softly as Emily shook it once. His eyes widened. And then, to Elena's disbelief, he let out a soft, delighted giggle. Her lips parted, stunned. Daniel smiled at the sound. "Told you I've been there." Elena watched the two children. Max reached out, batting at the rattle, and Emily giggled. In the chaos of her day, courtrooms, judgment, stares, this moment felt unreal. Quiet, gentle. It had been so long since anyone had helped her without expecting something in return. "You have a way with babies," she said softly. Daniel glanced down at Max, then back at Elena. "Well, when you raise one on your own, you learn pretty fast. My wife passed away 3 years ago. Complications during childbirth. Emily was 2. Elena's heart pulled in her chest. "I'm sorry." He nodded, looking away briefly. "Thanks. We figured things out. Mostly." She looked at Emily again. So bright, so sweet, and back at the man, holding her son like he belonged there. "You're doing an amazing job," she said, surprising even herself with the emotion in her voice. He met her eyes. Then the moment lingered. In that brief silence, the noise of the train faded. The lights softened. Something passed between them. Understanding, exhaustion, maybe even a flicker of something else. Elena's mind whispered a thought she didn't want to hear. What if I didn't have to do this alone anymore? She pushed it away. Too dangerous. Too soon. Still, the warmth lingered. The train began to slow. The robotic voice above them announced the next station. The movement stirred Max slightly, but he didn't cry. His eyes were heavy now, half lit with sleep. Daniel shifted his weight. "Hey," he said. "This might sound weird, but there's a little cafe just outside this station. It's quiet, clean, and has a decent changing table in the restroom. If you want a few minutes to rest before heading home. I mean, no pressure." Elena hesitated. The offer was simple, kind, no strings, but that's what made it feel so unfamiliar. "I don't usually do this," she said. "Neither do I," he replied. "But you look like you could use 5 minutes off your feet." Elena looked at Max, peaceful now. One hand still clutched near Daniel's collar, and then at Emily, who was humming softly, swaying with the train. Her own knees were trembling. She took a breath. "Okay," she said. The train came to a stop with a low squeal. The doors slid open. Daniel stepped aside, waiting for her to lead the way. She nodded once softly, and together the four of them stepped off the train into the hum of a new chapter neither of them had expected. The cafe was small and warm, tucked into the corner of a quiet street just a block from the subway station. The scent of fresh coffee and cinnamon lingered in the air, and soft jazz music drifted through the speakers overhead. The windows fogged slightly from the autumn chill outside, turning the world beyond into a blur of amber light and passing shapes. Elena sat at a booth near the back, her coat draped over the chair beside her, one heel dangling loosely from her foot. Across the table, Daniel bounced Max gently on his knee while Emily sat beside him, sipping hot chocolate with a mountain of whipped cream on top. She watched Daniel quietly. He held Max with the ease of someone who had done this hundreds of times. His hands were large, a little rough, hands that had clearly worked. Yet every movement he made was gentle, patient. Max, still a little warm with fever, cooed and leaned into his shoulder, content for the first time all day. "Likes you," Elena murmured. Daniel glanced up, smiling. "Babies are honest. They don't fake it." She let out a soft laugh. It surprised her. The sound felt strange in her chest, as if it had been waiting too long to be let out. He adjusted Max in his arms and looked over at her, his tone casual. "I used to be a carpenter. Mostly custom furniture, kitchen counters, toy chests, stuff like that." Elena raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Used to be." Business dried up, he said with a shrug. "Co hit hard. I had to sell the tools. These days I do what I can. Some delivery driving, occasional odd jobs, cleaning gigs. Whatever pays the rent and keeps Emily fed." He said it without bitterness, no self-pity, no resentment, just facts. That struck Elena more than any story of struggle could have. "I don't know how you do it," she said quietly. Daniel glanced at Emily, who was now drawing something on a napkin with a crayon the barista had given her. "I don't either," he admitted, "but she gives me a reason to figure it out every morning." Elena looked at Max again, his tiny hand wrapped around Daniel's shirt, and felt something shift inside her. Maybe it was the warmth of the cafe, or the way the world had slowed just enough for her to breathe, or maybe it was simply watching someone be a good father without needing recognition for it. She stood and walked to the counter. A few minutes later, she returned with a warm cup of milk topped with cinnamon and set it gently in front of Emily. "For you," she said. "I hope cinnamon's okay." Emily lit up. "Thank you. It's my favorite." Elena smiled, then sat back down and pulled a wet wipe from her bag to clean Max's chin. He giggled as she gently wiped his mouth. She smoothed back his hair, pausing to press her lips to his forehead. His fever had started to fade. Her eyes met Daniel's again. There was no noise in the moment, no rushing, just peace. "It's real life." Emily tugged gently on her dad's sleeve. "Can I show her?" Daniel nodded. "Of course, honey." Emily reached into her small backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She handed it to Elena with both hands, grinning. "I drew this," she said proudly. "It's us on the train." Elena unfolded it. Crayon lines danced across the page, for figures hand in hand. A tiny baby with a round face, a girl with curls, a man with messy hair, and a woman in a crown, smiling. "You drew me with a crown?" Elena asked, touched. "Because you looked like a sad princess," Emily said very seriously. "But now you're smiling. So I think you're better now." Elena's throat tightened. She blinked back tears and pressed a hand over her heart. "I think I am," she whispered. Daniel smiled quietly. The drawing fluttered slightly in her hands as she looked down at it again. She had been surrounded by million-dollar contracts, relentless deadlines, courtroom fights. But somehow this little sketch made her feel seen in a way nothing else had. Maybe this was what healing looked like. Not in headlines or victories, but in hot milk, baby giggles, and the crayon crown of a 5-year-old girl. The afternoon light filtered softly through the cafe windows, casting warm gold across the table where Daniel and Elena sat. Their coffee cups were nearly empty. Max slept peacefully in his stroller, cheeks still flushed. Emily was on the floor nearby, building tiny houses out of sugar packets. Outside, the city moved on. In here it was quiet. Daniel rubbed his calloused hands together. When Emily's mom and I were still together, I had this dream. Elena looked up, curious. I wanted to open a toy shop. Wooden toys, handcrafted, no batteries, just imagination. He smiled. Faintly. I even named it Westwood Wonders. Had the logo sketched, the colors picked, everything. What happened? Elena asked. He paused. Life. Rent climbed. Materials got pricey. Then she got pregnant, and we were scared but happy until Emily was born. His voice faltered. She passed away 3 days later. Complications. We were just talking about names, holding hands, and then she was gone. Elena's heart sank. I had no idea what I was doing. I sold the tools, took odd jobs, anything to keep going. She was quiet, then softly. I'm so sorry. Daniel nodded. I don't regret it. Emily's everything, but sometimes I wonder who I might have become if things had gone differently. A beat of silence passed. Then Elena spoke almost reluctantly. My life didn't go to plan either. Daniel looked over. I was the golden girl. Stanford MBA. Built my company from a server in my garage. By 30, I was on Forbes covers. My parents called me unstoppable. She exhaled. Then I got pregnant. Daniel said nothing. The father disappeared the second I told him. My parents, well, they said having a baby out of wedlock would ruin my brand, that it made me look emotional, weak. Daniel frowned. They really said that they made me publicly, and my board tried to force me into a maternity leave I never asked for. Her voice cracked. People think money means strength, but sometimes it just means your pain gets ignored. Daniel's gaze softened. You've been carrying this alone. Elena nodded. 10 months. I've been building boardrooms with one hand and holding Max with the other. And I am tired. The silence was heavy, but it felt shared. Then a voice chimed in from the next table. Wait, are you Elena Marlowe? They turned. A man in a hoodie held up his phone, squinting at a headline. You're her, right? That tech. Trial. Marlowe Vizkinard. Daniel blinked. His eyes shifted slowly toward Elena. You're that Elena Marlowe. She didn't deny it. She didn't flinch. I was hoping to. Just be Elena today. Daniel sat back stunned. I didn't know. I really keep up with that stuff. I thought you were maybe a professor or something. She gave a half laugh. You mean I don't look like a corporate ice queen? That's not what I meant, he said quickly. I know, she replied softer now. But that's what they say. The media doesn't want the truth. They want whatever gets clicks. Daniel nodded slowly. You don't seem like the woman they describe. That's because, she said, they've never asked who I really am. He looked at her a long moment, then said quietly, I believe you. Somehow those 3 words carried more weight than any courtroom victory Elena had ever known. It started with coincidence. A week after the coffee shop, Elena spotted Daniel and Emily again, this time at the park. Max was bundled in her arms, still sniffling from a cold, and Emily was tugging Daniel toward the swings. Their eyes met across the green. Daniel offered a small wave. Elena waved back. 2 days later, it happened again. Elena was standing at the pharmacy counter trying to decide between 2 infant fever medications when she heard a familiar voice behind her. Try the purple label, works faster. She turned. Daniel was there holding Emily's hand, a bag of vitamins in the other. They laughed at the absurdity of it, at how this sprawling city somehow kept bringing them together. The next time it wasn't coincidence, it was invitation. Ella Lenina had learned Daniel dropped Emily off at a nearby preschool that morning. She showed up 10 minutes early and offered to walk in with him. Emily lit up when she saw her. Messina. And just like that, the moments added up. One rainy afternoon, Max developed a low fever and wouldn't stop crying. Elena, overwhelmed, unsure if it was more than teething, called Daniel. She didn't know what she expected, but he came with homemade chicken soup in a thermos and a bag of cut-up pears. Max settled in his arms almost instantly. "Your soup smells like childhood," Elena murmured, watching as Daniel gently fed Max with the patience of a seasoned father. He smiled. "It's my mom's recipe," she used to say. "Garlic doesn't just fix colds, it fixes broken hearts." Elena didn't respond. She was too busy blinking back tears. A few days later, she invited them over. Daniel hesitated at first, unsure if he belonged in a place like hers, but Emily, giddy at the idea of seeing Max again, tugged him forward. Elena's townhouse was modern, glass-walled, filled with art and quiet elegance. But as Daniel walked in, he didn't comment on the view or the designer lighting. He knelt to help Emily remove her wet boots and told her not to touch the white rug. That more than anything made Elena's heart skip. He didn't fawn. He didn't shrink. He simply was. She poured tea. He fixed the leg on Max's high chair that had been wobbling for weeks. Emily drew pictures at the kitchen island while Max giggled at her dramatic reenactment of a bear losing his honey. The night passed quietly, naturally, like a page in a life Elena hadn't known she could have. But it was the night Max woke up screaming that changed everything. It was nearly midnight. Elena, in silk pajamas and messy hair, stood in the nursery, bouncing Max to no avail. He was teething, angry, feverish, inconsolable. She tried everything. Teething ring, singing, shushing. Nothing worked. In a moment of desperation, she texted Elena, "I'm sorry to ask this late. Max won't stop crying. I don't know what to do." The reply came instantly. "Daniel, I'll be there in 10. When he arrived, he didn't knock loudly or speak much. Just walked in quietly, asked where Max's favorite blanket was, and took the baby into his arms like he'd been born to. Then he started humming a lullaby, simple, low, familiar." Max hiccuped, then gradually calmed. Elena watched from the doorway, one hand over her mouth. "I used to sing this to Emily," Daniel said softly, not turning. "But it was my wife who made it up. Just for lines. She sang it the night before she passed." His voice cracked, but he kept singing. Max's cries faded into silence. Elena couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She'd never seen Max so calm, not even in her arms. She sank slowly to the floor, tears spilling down her cheeks. Daniel turned finally, rocking Max gently. "I hope it's okay," I sang to him. He whispered. Elena nodded, unable to speak. When she finally found her voice, it came out as a whisper. "I've never seen him this peaceful." And in that moment, sitting on the nursery floor beneath soft moonlight, watching a man who wasn't hers soothe the baby who was her whole world, she had never felt more safe or more seen. The photo appeared on the front page of a gossip site by morning. Millionaire CEO caught on cozy coffee date with Bluco collar single dad, and beneath it the headline, in bold letters from boardroom to broom closet, is Elena Marlowe falling for a janitor. The picture was innocent enough. Elena laughing holding a coffee cup while Daniel reached across the table to wipe something off Max's chin. Emily sat between them, drawing on a napkin a snapshot of peace. But online, it was twisted into scandal. The story exploded across social media. Comment sections filled with ridicule and speculation. Classic pity project. Rich woman gets bored and finds a charity case. Think he's clearly using her. Watch. Next, he'll be moving into her mansion. Imagine being a CEO and dating a guy who cleans toilets. Elena's inbox flooded. Her board called an emergency meeting. Your personal life is beginning to affect brand perception, one shareholder warned, his voice clipped over speakerphone. Another added cold, if this continues, we'll have no choice but to review your authority. Elena sat at her desk, fists clenched in her lap. Max was napping in the nursery upstairs. The silence in the house was louder than any crying. That afternoon, Daniel showed up at her door. She didn't call him. He just knew. He stood on the threshold, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes dimmer than she'd ever seen them. I saw the articles, he said simply. Elena opened her mouth, but he raised a hand gently. I'm not angry, he said. I'm just sad. She stepped aside to let him in, but he didn't move. Elena, he said softly, I can't let Emily grow up Googling my name and finding out her dad was treated like a scandal. Her voice cracked. You're not a scandal. He smiled sadly. To you maybe not, but to the world I'm a punchline. She took a breath, trying to stay calm. Daniel, I don't care what they say, but you have a company to run. He said, you have investors and headlines and people who expect you to live a certain way, and I get it. I do. He stepped back. I clean buildings, Elena. You own them. She flinched at his words, not from judgment, but from how deeply they hurt. I never saw you that way, she whispered. Ah, Tom said. I know, he said gently. And that's why I need to go before I become the reason everything falls apart for you. Tears welled in her eyes. Her voice rose, not in anger, but desperation. You think I care what some shareholders say? You think I haven't been torn apart in the press before? I've had my face on magazine covers with headlines calling me a corporate witch. Daniel looked at her silent. Her hands shook. You are not a punchline, she said, voice breaking. You are the kindest, most decent man I've ever met. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then, quietly, but maybe being kind isn't enough to survive your world. She stared at him, breathing hard, a tear slipping down her cheek. Daniel gave her one last look. The kind that says everything words can't. The kind that's full of longing and sadness and something almost like love. Then he turned and walked down the steps. Elena didn't follow. She stood in the doorway, Max's soft whimpers coming through the baby monitor behind her, holding onto the frame like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her chest ached. She had fought off lawsuits, reporters, betrayal, but this leaving it hurt in a way she hadn't prepared for. Not because she lost something, but because for the first time she had started to believe in something real. And now it was gone. The studio lights were warm and blinding, but Elena Marlowe sat with her back straight, her hair pulled into a simple low bun, and a calm she hadn't felt in weeks. Across from her, the talk show host gave a practiced smile. Joining us today is Elena Marlowe, tech mogul, philanthropist, and now unexpectedly the subject of internet gossip. Elena, thank you for being here. Elena offered a small smile. Thank you for having me. There was a pause. Then came the question she knew was coming. Your name has been trending nonstop. The photos, the headlines. People are wondering, has the Ice Queen of Silicon Avenue finally gone soft? Elena took a breath, fingers tightening slightly in her lap. I used to think showing emotion made you weak, she said, her voice steady but sincere. I built walls, high ones. I worked hard, earned my success, and somewhere along the way, I started believing that being a mother, showing up for my son, had to come second, that it was something I had to fit into the corners of my schedule like a hobby. The host blinked, surprised by her honesty. Elena continued, her eyes beginning to glisten. But last week on a subway train, I learned that strength doesn't always look like boardrooms or billion-dollar deals. Sometimes it looks like a stranger holding your sick baby because your arms are too tired. Sometimes it looks like letting someone see you completely undone and not walking away. She paused. The room was quiet. Today, she said, I'm stepping back from 2 executive roles in my company. Gasps filled the audience. I'm not quitting. I'm just making room for my son, for myself, for the parts of life I've missed while trying so hard to prove I deserve my place in the world. Her voice softened and the camera zoomed slightly in. I used to think being a mother would make me appear weak, but I've come to realize being a mother is the bravest thing I've ever done. There was silence, then applause. Slow, growing, heartfelt. The clip went viral within hours. Millions viewed it. Thousands commented. I didn't expect to cry today. She said everything I felt. For years, I judged her and I was wrong. This is the kind of leadership we need. Thank you for reminding working moms everywhere that we're allowed to choose our children without losing ourselves. Across the city, in the dim storage hallway of a downtown office building, Daniel wiped sweat from his brow and leaned against a stack of folded chairs. He was on break. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he pulled it out to see a message from his coworker. Hey man, your Subway lady's on TV. Daniel hesitated, then clicked the link. The video buffered, and then there she was. Elena, hair simple, eyes honest, voice strong. He watched her speak about motherhood, about strength, about a subway train that changed her life. And something in his chest cracked. Emily peeked around the corner, her tiny pink backpack bouncing as she skipped toward him. What you watching? She asked, craning her neck. Daniel handed her one earbud. She listened for a few seconds, then looked up at him. Daddy, she whispered. She's still the sad princess. He smiled faintly. Yeah, but Emily grinned. She's a brave princess now, too. Daniel didn't say anything, but as he stared at the screen, at Elena's eyes looking somewhere far beyond the camera, he knew something had changed. Not just in her, but in him. Because for the first time since his wife's passing, Daniel felt something crack through the gray routine of survival, hope, and maybe, just maybe, this story wasn't finished yet. The package arrived without warning. Daniel found it leaning against his apartment door after a long shift. It was heavy, wrapped in brown paper and tied with natural twine. His name was written in neat cursive on a cream-colored envelope, taped to the top to Daniel West and the hands that never gave up. Inside was a bound document, a complete business plan, branding, supplier lists, startup capital, mock-ups, and a lease for a small workshop space on Maplewood Avenue. The logo on the cover read, West Wonders, handmade toys with heart. Daniel stared at it, stunned. At the bottom of the stack, tucked beneath the business proposal, was a letter, handwritten. It read, Every dream needs someone to believe in it. This is for yours. Funded by the EM Foundation, Emily and Max, of course. His hands trembled. He didn't know how to process the feeling swelling in his chest. Joy, gratitude, and something else. Something that had been waiting quietly since the day he stepped onto that subway train. Weeks later, the crisp air of early spring carried the scent of popcorn and cotton candy across the schoolyard of Little Acorns Preschool. Handmade booze lined the courtyard. Laughter echoed from a bounce house in the corner. Paper lanterns hung from string lights. Overhead, Daniel stood by a wooden display of toy animals and puzzles. His work, his dream. Emily was running around with face paint and pigtails. Flying. She was laughing louder than he'd heard in months. Then he saw her. Alina. She stood just beyond the playground fence, Max on her hip. The wind tugged at her sundress and a soft smile curled her lips as she caught his gaze. Their eyes locked for a moment, longer than a greeting, shorter than a lifetime. She walked toward him, stopped just a step away, and with that smile still on her face, she said softly, Do you still need someone to read bedtime stories? Daniel blinked, his throat tightened. Every night, she looked down at Max, then back at Daniel. We're free. That afternoon faded into golden light. Max and Emily lay on a picnic blanket, giggling, passing a small wooden train back and forth between them. Max clapped. Emily clapped back. The two of them already their own little team. And Daniel and Elena sat a few feet away under the shade of a tall oak tree. Their hands rested side by side on the grass, pinkies brushing gently. No words needed. The world didn't stop. But, for this moment, it felt like it had slowed down just enough for two broken hearts to find a rhythm again. They watched their children together. Elena leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. Home, she thought, is not a place. It is this us. They were not perfect. Daniel still worked long shifts while building the business. Elena still had meetings and headlines and old wounds that echoed louder some days. But now they shared the weight, the laughter, the midnight feedings and preschool drop-offs and backyard blanket forts. They became a family, an unexpected, extraordinary one. Emily called Elena Lena for weeks, before slipping and calling her mama one night while brushing her teeth. Elena cried in the hallway afterward. Max called Daniel to one rainy afternoon. When they were watching the thunder together from the porch, Daniel dropped the mug he was holding. It shattered. So, did he? But not from pain, from healing. And as seasons changed, so did they. One subway ride had carried more than just two parents and two children. It had carried four hearts towards something they never saw coming, but somehow had always needed. Whether you are wealthy or working class, a mother or a father, there is one moment that unites us all. That night when the baby won't sleep, when your arms ache and your eyes bleed.